Israel and Hamas have both presented their terms for a complete ceasefire and an end to the war. The negotiating countries are now trying to find a compromise between the sides. Meanwhile, fighting has substantially intensified in northern Gaza. Massive airstrikes and IDF activity has been reported in the northern areas of Zaytun. In the West Bank, escalations continue, while Israel is approving plans to expand settlements into the E1 section, effectively severing the northern parts of the West Bank from the southern parts. You're watching the Israel-Palestine Report with Professor Alon Burstein. Let's dive in. Starting with the hostage and truce negotiations. Over the past week, the negotiating countries, that includes Egypt, Qatar, and the United States, continued their efforts to reach a compromise proposal that will allow both Israel and Hamas to return to the negotiating table. As a reminder, the negotiations between the sides broke down several weeks ago, with Israel and the United States both recalling their teams following Hamas's response to the latest proposals in the hostage negotiations. Since then, Israel has aligned itself with the United States and has said that it will no longer be willing to negotiate a partial deal. It will only be willing to talk about a complete deal and an end to the war. Negotiations have effectively been at a stalemate ever since. Before I continue, I'm going to remind everyone, hit that subscribe button to stay up to date on all the latest developments in the war and in this arena more broadly. So, where are the negotiations stuck? Following Israel's statements that the country will no longer negotiate a partial deal, this week, August 10th, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu announced the 5 conditions that he says Israel is demanding in exchange for an end to the war, i.e. these are the conditions that Israel is willing to put forth in order to actually move towards any deal and resolution. Netanyahu listed them in the following order, including the complete disarming of Hamas and its Al-Qassam brigades, the release of all hostages, both the 20 live hostages and the bodies of 30 hostages that are held, the complete demilitarization of the Gaza Strip, i.e. relating to all the weaponry and weapons manufacturing capabilities in Gaza, Israel maintaining security control over the Gaza Strip, and the establishment of a civil administration in Gaza that is not run by Hamas, nor it is run by the Palestinian Authority. In a moment of analysis looking at these 5 terms, I'm going to add that back in May of this year, Netanyahu also listed 5 similar terms, only there he included that all of Hamas's leadership will have to go into exile, and that Trump's plan to relocate Palestinians from Gaza would have to be implemented. Both those things now have been dropped from Israel's demands. Over the past week, Netanyahu and his cabinet members repeatedly stated that Israel is willing to end the war if those terms are met, and also repeatedly stated that if those terms are not met, then Israel is going to move from the diplomatic option to proceed militarily to take over those remaining 25% of the Gaza Strip. Hamas, in turn, has long demanded that any deal should include a final end to the war and a complete ceasefire between the sides rather than a partial deal, and over the past week it repeated its previous demands that it had been stating for a long time. The movement has publicly agreed to relinquish its civil government in the Gaza Strip. However, it has categorically rejected any call to disarm or for the demilitarization of Gaza. Again, here in a moment of analysis, I'm going to say that while the group's leaders have stated that Hamas is willing to give up the governing powers in Gaza, they've never actually put this into any of their proposals. The group has repeated this, but it is not something that has actually been put forth in any deal that has thus far been proposed. And also, Hamas has repeatedly said that they will hand over control of the governing powers in Gaza only to an agreed-upon Palestinian body, i.e. Hamas is not saying in those terms it is willing to accept any Israeli security control. In addition to this, the group has demanded a complete IDF withdrawal from the Gaza Strip as any part of a final ceasefire between the sides, and international guarantees that Israel will not resume fighting in Gaza after the deal is completed. So, what happened over the past week? Where do things stand? On August 11th, the Hamas delegation that was led by Khalil Haya met with Egyptian negotiators in Cairo, and reports are that Egypt is now attempting to present a compromise formula that both sides will be able to say part of our demands are met and come back to the negotiating table. Sky News in Arabic and Al Arabi Al Jadid both reported on this meeting between Khalil Haya and the Egyptian delegation, and according to the report, Egypt is formulating a proposal that includes the release of all hostages in exchange for Palestinian prisoners, an IDF redeployment in Gaza, and a withdrawal from most of the Gaza Strip that will happen under the United States and Arab supervision. According to the report, this is deliberately being phrased as an interim redeployment, not a complete withdrawal from the entire Gaza Strip, and the Israeli military will stay in those positions until finalizing the negotiations between the sides over the demilitarization and governance in Gaza. Other reports also stated that the Egyptian proposal is also relating to Israel's demands to disarm the Al-Qassam brigades, and, again, according to those reports, also in this, Egypt is attempting to propose somewhat of a middle ground compromise. According to those leaks, Egypt is proposing that Hamas will, quote-unquote, suspend its military activity during this interim period, and that this suspension will be guaranteed by Turkey as well as by other countries. In other words, Israel's redeployment and withdrawal from the majority of the Gaza Strip will be guaranteed by both Arab countries and the United States, and Hamas suspending its military activity will be guaranteed by Turkey as well as, again, other Arab states. Some reports speculated as to what this suspension might mean, and a repeated rumor was that Egypt's proposal was that Hamas's weaponry would be locked up in warehouses that will be supervised and guarded by the Palestinian Authority. Again, that is all rumors at this point. What we do know is that a Hamas delegation met with the delegation in Egypt, and the different proposals are currently being floated. So, where do things stand right now? On the one hand, the negotiating countries are still attempting to achieve a breakthrough, and both Israel and Hamas have expressed willingness to hear the proposals of the negotiating countries. Hamas is reportedly going to convey Egypt's proposal to the other Palestinian factions, and Israel is also maintaining close contact with the negotiating teams, including, I'll say, a visit of the head of the Israeli Mossad, Dadi Barnea, to Qatar. This happened on August 14th. On the one hand, he did visit Qatar. On the other hand, Israel then denied this had anything to do with negotiations, but very clearly, when the head of the Mossad met with the Qatari Prime Minister, the negotiations would have been discussed. On the other hand, both sides have also repeatedly stated that they will not return to the table unless a proposal includes all of their stated demands, which obviously completely contradict each other at this point. On August 9th, Bishara Bahbah, who was Steve Witkoff's emissary to the negotiations, announced his resignation due to the collapse in the talks, and in Israel it has been repeatedly stated that the way things stand right now, the country is moving to a military option rather than the diplomatic negotiations. Obviously, it remains to be seen. Things are going to continuously develop. Right now, the negotiating countries are trying to achieve that breakthrough, but both sides, Israel and Hamas, are waiting for the countries to present to them a somewhat sweetened deal in order to come back to the table. Until then, the military option is the one that both Israel and to some extent Hamas are still talking about. Alongside the negotiations over the past week, there have been a substantial intensification of fighting in the Gaza Strip, particularly in the areas of Gaza City and Zaytun, that is this area in northern Gaza and the southern parts of Gaza City. On Sunday, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad claimed responsibility for firing 2 rockets from northern Gaza into southern Israel, and later in the day, the IDF reported major airstrikes in the areas of Saja'iyah, reportedly attacking those launching arenas. The following day, the Al-Qassam brigades reported ambushing IDF soldiers in the Tufts region of Gaza City, using sniper and mortar attacks as well. The IDF later reported about these battles also, stating that airstrikes were carried out targeting the Hamas snipers in that region. Again, this is all in northern Gaza. The first reports of escalations in the areas of Zaytun, again that is in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip, the southern area of Gaza City, began on August 11th. Major airstrikes were reported in that area, and Palestinian sources reported that 6 children and 3 adults had been killed in an attack that targeted a school that was housing internally displaced people. The Israeli military, in turn, reported that it had attacked Hamas operatives in a command center that the group had established, and that the military had no knowledge of any uninvolved casualties. Major airstrikes with multiple casualties were reported in Zaytun over the next 3 days as well, and on August 14th, the Al-Qassam brigades reported a joint attack that it carried out on IDF troops in the areas of Zaytun, targeting tanks with Yasin 105 anti-tank missiles, and then attacking the house where the IDF troops had withdrawn. Finally, on August 15th, the IDF reported that it is launching a major ground offensive in the areas of Zaytun and pouring at least 2 divisions into that area, and evacuation orders were also issued to Palestinians in several different parts of that neighborhood, with intensifying fighting continuing into August 16th as well. Meanwhile, in southern Gaza, the IDF and the Al-Qassam brigades both reported intensive fighting that occurred on August 11th, with the Israeli military reportedly destroying several underground facilities and targeting Hamas operatives in southern Gaza, and the Al-Qassam brigades reporting targeting IDF command centers near the Zorob Hill in the areas of Rafah, that is in the most southern parts of the Gaza Strip. In addition to that, on August 12th, the Al-Quds brigades, that is a military wing of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, reported detonating explosives near IDF vehicles in the areas of Han Yunis, and the following day, the Al-Qassam brigades also reported attacking IDF tanks, while the IDF reported major airstrikes and intensive fighting in the western areas of Han Yunis. Again, this is all in the southern parts of the Gaza Strip. Airstrikes were also reported on August 16th in the El Mawasi Humanitarian Zone in the southern parts of the Gaza Strip, that is this area along the coast over here. According to Palestinian reports, at least 2 people were killed in those airstrikes. In addition to this quote-unquote regular fighting that's been going on in Gaza, there were at least 5 noteworthy incidents that occurred in the fighting in the Gaza Strip over the past week. First, on August 11th, Anasa Sharif, who was one of the top Al Jazeera correspondents in Gaza, who also the IDF stated was a Hamas operative in charge of rocket fire in Jabalia refugee camp, was assassinated in an IDF airstrike in Gaza City. This made major international headlines. However, I'm not going to elaborate on it here. I will say if you'd like more information about that, check out an interview that I gave several days ago on August 13th. I'll put a link to it in the first comment below, where I discuss that assassination much more in depth. A second noteworthy incident is a very unusual event that took place in the Gaza Strip on August 12th, when the Israeli military reportedly sent special force units into the central city of Deir el-Balah, this area in the central parts of the Gaza Strip, and they came in an unmarked bus. According to reports, the forces then arrested a Palestinian named Ismail Abdul Karim Hattab and evacuated the area with Hattab in custody under the cover of very intensive airstrikes. This is noteworthy not only because this is a very rare operation of the IDF to carry out clandestine operations and arrest Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, but also, since then, neither Israel nor Palestinian sources have said anything about Hattab's identity, why he was arrested in this manner, and at this point, this remains relatively unknown what exactly happened in that operation. A third incident also occurred in Deir el-Balah on August 12th. On that day, the IDF published images showing an airstrike that was carried out in the area, targeting Hamas operatives that had been operating under a disguise of the international humanitarian aid agency, the World Central Kitchen. As you can see in the video that the IDF distributed, the operatives put a sticker of the organization on their car, and they wore yellow vests marking them as humanitarian aid workers while operating and being fully armed with Hamas weaponry. According to the IDF, the military checked and confirmed with the World Central Kitchen prior to the attack that the car and the individuals had no affiliation with that organization, and the IDF then carried out that airstrike. It also distributed this video stating repeatedly that Hamas is using the humanitarian aid as a cover for its military operation. A fourth incident happened on August 15th when the IDF published a video showing the use of special sealing equipment that the military used to seal a 7-kilometer-long tunnel in the northern areas of Beit Hanun. According to reports, some 20,000 square cubes of this material were pumped into pipes that extended back all the way to Israel, and the military also published pictures showing the extent of this tunnel and the tunnel array that was in the areas of Beit Hanun. The last unusual incident of this week occurred on August 16th when an IDF drone reportedly crashed in northern Gaza in the areas of Rimal, that is the northern area of Gaza City near the coast. The Israeli military stated that there was no danger of intelligence information being leaked from the drone, even though this was an intelligence drone, and different videos then showed Palestinians that were carrying the drone off to a different location. According to at least what is seen in the videos, the drone appears relatively intact and was carried off, presumably handed over at some point to Hamas, but again, that is speculation. Regarding casualties in all this fighting, the IDF reported that 2 soldiers were injured in the Gaza Strip over the past week, leaving the total number of IDF soldiers killed in the Gaza Strip since the invasion began on 454, and 2,872 IDF soldiers reported injured in the Gaza Strip, again since the invasion began. The Palestinian Health Ministry in the Gaza Strip, in turn, reported that 528 Palestinians were killed in the Gaza Strip over the past week, bringing the total number of people killed in the Gaza Strip since the war began to 61,897, with 155,275 people reported injured in the Gaza Strip since the war began. As always, I remind everyone the Palestinian Health Ministry in the Gaza Strip does not distinguish between militants and civilians. It simply accounts for the amount of bodies that have been categorized and brought through Palestinian hospitals in the Gaza Strip. I also remind everyone that according to different estimates of the Palestinian Health Ministry and of the United Nations, there are between 7,000 to 10,000 Palestinians that are still unaccounted for. Likely they are buried under the rubbles of the different airstrikes and presumed dead. Turning to the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip, the substantial increase in the entrance of humanitarian aid coming into the Gaza Strip over the past weeks has continued over the last week, with an average of just over 100 aid paradropping missions being reported each day in Gaza, and an average of between 80 to 120 aid trucks entering into the Gaza Strip each week. It's important to note this is far less than has been stated by all international aid agencies and the United Nations is required into the Gaza Strip. They have stated that between 500 to 600 aid trucks of food, water, and medical supplies have to come in each day. However, it is still a substantial increase from what the situation was several weeks ago. Alongside this, despite reports of prices continuously dropping slightly in the Gaza markets, 39 people were still reportedly died from malnutrition in the Gaza Strip over the past week, and dozens were also reportedly killed in violent incidents near different aid distribution sites both in northern, central, and southern Gaza. On the diplomatic level of the humanitarian situation, on August 10th, a joint call was published by 24 countries and involving over 100 humanitarian aid agencies, stating that the conditions of starvation are fast developing throughout the entire Gaza Strip. The call heavily condemned policies that Israel has implemented since March of this year that reportedly hinder access of private humanitarian aid agencies, and called upon Israel to remove the administrative barriers that it has implemented again over the last several months. The call mentioned several of these, and diplomats giving interviews also mentioned several of them as well. Among others, they stated that an aid agency cannot operate in Gaza if an employee of the organization called for a boycott of Israel during the last 7 years. They also cited regulations that require aid agencies to register all Palestinian employees in the Gaza Strip that are working for them, which the agencies said put these people at grave risk. And they also cited individual policies that Israel has implemented, like the blocking of potatoes from coming into Gaza, since, according to Israel, they have a longer shelf life and could therefore be stored by Hamas in warehouses for later sale. The countries called upon Israel to remove the increased regulations, open all access routes, and allow more agencies to operate freely in the Gaza Strip. Responding to this, on August 14th, the IDF's coordinator of government aid activities in the territories issued a statement rejecting the allegations and stating that while Hamas seeks to exploit the humanitarian aid to strengthen its military and financial capabilities, Israel imposed the new regulations as a way to divert the aid away from Hamas and to ensure that it gets to the Palestinian population directly. The IDF condemned the aid agencies for refusing to follow the directives and register their activities based upon the new regulations, and stated that while nearly 20 aid agencies registered and are bringing humanitarian aid into Gaza, the refusal of other agencies to do so, quote, raises serious concern about their true intentions and the possibility of ties between the organizations or their employees and Hamas, end quote. In addition to this, there was another development on the humanitarian front on August 10th, when Israel approved a direct donation from Israel of $50 million given directly to the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, making this the first time that Israel is directly funding any humanitarian endeavor in Gaza during the war. There was some confusion about this over the past week, so I'm just going to add for clarification. While Israel controls all the crossings and airspace into the Gaza Strip, and therefore it has to approve all aid missions that come in, how much can come in, and what exactly is allowed in, none of the humanitarian aid that has come into the Gaza Strip since the war began has been paid for or donated by Israel. This has all been given by other countries, the United Nations, or private humanitarian organizations. This $50 million is thus the first time that Israel itself is paying for humanitarian aid in Gaza. It's also important to note that that move, which was approved by Israel's finance minister Bezalel Smotrich, came under substantial criticism from within his own party, since he himself has said that he will not allow any humanitarian aid to come into Gaza. The finance ministry then stated that this was only a bridge loan that was given until international funding to the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is made up. In addition to this, another humanitarian disaster was reported on August 15th in the southern areas of Khan Yunis. Following substantial bombings that occurred in that city, a major collapse of sanitation infrastructure and pipes was reported in the region, leading to a flooding of the Nasser hospital with sewage water. According to reports, repair teams could not get to the site and try to fix the damage due to the fighting. As you see in the videos, this left the hospital in a dysfunctional situation. Before I conclude, one more arena where significant developments occurred over the past week that I'm going to mention is the West Bank. In addition to continuous violent incidents that occurred between Palestinians, Israeli settlers, and the IDF, a very important development occurred on Wednesday when Israel's finance minister Bezalel Smotrich, who I will say also serves as the minister in charge of the civil administration in the West Bank, announced that Israel is officially unfreezing the construction plans for the expansion of the Ma'ale Adumim settlement in the areas east of Jerusalem, known as E1. This is one of the most controversial regions of settlement expansion in the West Bank and has been the focal point of a substantial amount of international criticism over the years due to its strategic location that would effectively sever the northern parts of the West Bank from the southern parts. Now, due to the complexity of this, I'm not actually going to elaborate on this further here. Instead, I plan to upload a special video dedicated to this subject in the coming week. If you want to learn more about it, watch for that upload, and again, hit that subscribe button in order to see when that upload is published. That concludes my latest report on the Israel-Palestine arena. If you find these reports informative, please do remember to send them on to anyone you think might be interested in them. Subscribe, hit that like button, and feel free to leave any questions or comments in the comment section below. I'm Alon Burstein. I'm a visiting assistant professor and Israel Institute fellow in the Department of Political Science at Tufts University. Thanks for watching.